Use audio. Looks like audio is going. We'll wait for people to roll in. Admit all again. Hang on. Spotlight. Admit all. This will work.
So talk cosmetic.
Got a song for you. Skip. All right. Admit all. That bring everybody in. Looks like it. Got a full house. Let's see if this plays. Will it play? I don't know if it will. Hold on. Where is the audio set to go? Oh, I don't want to fiddle with all this. You guys can listen to this song. This is a pretty good one. The best one. That's kind of funny for where the world's at right now. We got a couple minutes. Let's see. It's 9 o'clock. Looks like everybody's in here. I need to go grab some water.
This was just constantly getting charged. I really did.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. How's that? Musical interlude while I went and got water. Okay. So tell me what's going on before we get rolling. Tomorrow's election day, isn't it? Yes, it is. That's why I played that song, because that's one of the words reminds me. Usually have the two parties and funny. It's really, really funny is if you listen to the names each has given each other. It's like every now and then you hear people call one side clowns, the other side jokers. It's like literally that's the words of the song. It's like, funny stuff. That's going to be one of those things that it's really interesting to see political change and that kind of stuff, particularly relates to the topics that we're getting into because it relates directly. And so, basically, one of the things that you all should do, and you've probably done this to some degree already, like you can take note of whenever there are changes, what things change and how, and realize that when it comes to the functional and practical life, the real everyday life, nothing really matters except for how you want to change things in your local sphere, that kind of thing. That's probably the most important lesson. Let's see here. What else did we talk about? I think I did this pretty well. In terms of things going on in the world, that's probably the only thing that I can think of that's taking place. Because you'll see how policies change and stuff like that over the next few years. And it's always a mixed bag. It always is. Let's see. So we are in Criminal Law 1. I think it's 8, 9, 10, I forget. No, it's public. Documents downloads. Yep, public. Open this up. Go back to where we were. Okay, so last time we were talking about, share my screen so that you guys can see this on here too. share screen. All right, I'm gonna make this a bit bigger. How about chat in case anyone wants to? But oh, time change. I forgot about time change. Usually, my favorite meme for this time of year, share. If I can turn back time, make sure you share it. Oh my God, you don't know share? You're giving me a blank look. Oh my God, we'll have to fix that at some point. Not today, I can't do that. Or listen to one song today. But that's another one. We'll have to listen to that one song. Oh, that's horrible. It's so awesome. Okay, so unlawful assembly, route, and riot. Last time we were talking about those. What you should look at that there, or those are the stages, right? They're the stages that those things develop. They're the stages of the seriousness associated with one's actions. And let's see here. Stephen, there we go. And so you get to see where these lines are drawn. Typically, you start talking about once you have about 3 or more people, you're in that state where it's unlawful assembly. Last time we were talking about this, it's keep in mind what it means to be able to assemble. That's literally a constitutional right, but it is something that is regulated. All of those rights are regulated to some degree. That's why in some spheres they'll talk about it in terms of the associated responsibilities that are connected to those individual rights where those lines are drawn. Here's one of them, right? If you're going to have a sizable group of people, what's the imposition that places on society around it? It's something that meeting of 3 people, it's literally going to create a disturbance there that you need to end with, well, what would you be talking about here? We should probably talk about that. Admit. The last time I talked a little bit about numbers, I think, and the way that these things tend to get enforced a little bit. Like you got a really large group, a smaller group. If they're clashing and there's potential violence, it's easier to deal with small groups, right? It's even more easier in some ways and more dangerous if you're dealing with large group against individual. And that's a common thing anymore. You see that a lot because of the way that things just transpire. And so you have that aspect of how we're going to enforce it, who we're going to hold responsible for. Because if you have enough people who hold something as negative, they can change the law, right? And so people there in these positions trying to enforce these things, or whether you're talking to police officers, the prosecutors, or whatever, they're trying to appease the public. What is the public here? And then we start looking at the imposition of places on. It's like, okay, 3 people just meeting. Is that something that you're going to need to go through those formal processes of going and applying for a permit to have some type of meeting, some type of public place, following all of the municipal ordinances or whatever it is that you have to abide by to be able to have that meeting? Or is it something that you should just be able to go out and I'm going to stand on this corner right here? Those lines are not always clear, right? What is unlawful? It's an assembly, disturbing the peace, the intention to participate in forcible, violent execution, unlawful enterprise, or lawful enterprise in an unauthorized manner. So lawful, I'm not here just to, what? Rally for a cause or something like that? What makes it unauthorized? Any ideas? So I think I went into the statutes last time. We'll talk a little bit more about it. Roll back, but it doesn't talk about it. Okay. Here, unlawful assembly. Person to assemble or act in concert with 4 or more persons for purpose of engaging in contact constituting a crime of riot, or to remain in the scene of a riot after being instructed to disperse by law authorities. Whenever 3 or more persons, this is for round, acting together, so the number changed, right? Acting together make any attempt to do an act toward the commission of an act that would be a riot if actually committed. So they're just planning around a riot. And then here, any use of force, violence, threat, use of force, violence, if accompanied by immediate power of execution by 3 or more persons acting together without law, authority of law, is a riot. talking about these things, it's like, okay, think back to what you've seen in the last 10 years, because you'll have a pretty good memory for the stuff you've seen in the news in the last 10 years, weird behaviors you see for people, particularly when you see them in groups and en masse. Right? That's one of those things that's kind of scary when you get large groups of people en masse. What have we seen related to that? Tomorrow's an election day. It's one of those things that's like some of that stuff's going to be directly tied into the stuff that takes place tomorrow to some degree, or stuff that had taken place in previous cycles, because since context and history are part of this. Um, Basically, what you start looking at here is, where is this? Right here. What degree of imposition are we talking about? What kind of problems are ensuing? What is, to some degree, reasonable, right? If you have a peaceable assembly, there's no problem with that. So when is it a problem? Is it a certain number of people in a specific location? Is it the location? Is it the number of people? Is it the noise generated, the attention? What is it? It's not easy to draw that line. It really isn't. That's one of the things society's been wrestling with for like the last, I don't know, almost 10 years, right? Who has the ability to meet to discuss what things for what purposes, and what does allow it promote, right? And then start thinking about social connections and all that kind of stuff that people have, and when a group is actually formed, and then realize that how little it actually takes, right? Anytime you have large groups of people moving around, what's the likelihood you have a few people who are planning something out together? How hard is it to move a large group of people? Have you guys ever been to a demonstration or anything like that? You know, large gatherings of people, particularly mobile ones. It's not easy to herd things. Ooh, farming experience. Okay, puppy dogs. Puppy. Dang. Ah. So puppy dogs. Every now and again, you run to the like the collies or shepherds or things like that, and what you'll see is how they react to animals and that kind of thing. It's like that's the same way that you can integrate people. It's if you're out in front and they're just kind of wandering in a direction, they'll follow. Right? Most people are just they're just kind of walking behind the person in front. Whoever's out in front can direct it. Right? And so those things we can direct them wherever you want. We're talking about the number of people and the places. How many people would it take to be an imposition on society that you'd call it, I don't know, unlawful? Start with an easier one. Location. I got a typo in there. I just noticed that. Freeway? About the middle of a freeway. And we got like 100 people and just, no, we're just gonna be right there in the middle of it. Does it seem all right? What's the problem there? Yes, you literally stop people from being able to go in. Right? This is a common thing that happens. They do this because they want the attention. You get that attention from that imposition you place on people, right? As they're doing that, you can see any number of groups for any number of causes do the same kind of things. You know, as you're out in these locations, what's the risk of the dangers here? You know, car accidents, good God, that stuff happens quite a bit too. And so, who's responsible there whenever you have a car accident? You've got something like this that's been taking place. You have someone who's driving disregards, or maybe doesn't disregard, approaches this group. And then with this group moving around, ooh, you're around a large number of people that are moving in concert. That's kind of a scary thing. If you've ever seen that before. And so another thing that happens is people freak out that someone starts pushing on my car, bashing on the windows and shit. Step on the accelerator, right? Okay, who's responsible there? Is it me for driving over somebody? Is it them for attacking my vehicle while I'm in the road where I should be? And then realizing, depending on where you're at and the political affiliations there, it varies quite directly, right? It's like, that's not really cool. That's not what this system's supposed to do. It's supposed to be even across the board. But it's got to figure out what society actually is doing. The depending on location, the number of people there. Here. Okay, there we go. You start running into that. Basically, it's you have a little bit of the discretion associated with dealing with it. But really, it's more about social outcry. And sometimes there's social outcry related to all kinds of different things. Let's say, okay, handling one of these things. Let's say it's just an unlawful assembly. What's the kind of things police officers normally do for that? Except if people aren't there supposed to be. Yes, don't know how to handle it. Okay. Depending on what it is, it can be real simple. It could be just sending a number of officers in to round everybody up to get them out of there, right? Take them in, process some minor level charges for whatever it is, whether it's like obstruction of roadway or something like that, right? That comes with the territory. You get charges for that or unlawful. So typically we don't enforce those. So it's sort of like how would you say? Driving 5 miles over the speed limit. It's like there's that law there, but there's that tolerance that we need to have for that space around it. And it applies for this too. And so figuring that out is not easy. You can look at the damage associated with the group being there in the first, right? If you have enough people, even if it's just an unlawful assembly, it's you can, whether it's trash, whether it's destroying properties, things of that nature. You start moving into the right area, of course, you're into violence and destruction, that kind of thing. And then realize that at the end of the day, there's also that social element where people will call it whatever they choose to call it for whatever it fits their purposes best. That's the big problem. This one's a riot, this one is not, because this one aligns with what I think is good. This one aligns with what I think is bad. And that's what it is. It should be about the dangers associated with such. But that's about enough on that, I think. Let's see, is there anything else I want to talk about there? Yeah. So a route's technically just taking steps, not the actually going into a riot. And you never hear much about route. All right. Was there anything I skipped? I skipped the drug stuff. We'll come back to that. Okay. Vagrancy, loitering, and then we'll come to, let's see, weapons offense, obstruction of passage. Okay, so I don't know whether I want to talk about drugs next. I think I probably will talk a little about drugs and this kind of stuff, and a little bit of vagrancy and loitering in the middle of it, right? So if you realize what we're dealing with here, when we're dealing with that unlawful assembly, it's ideally supposed to be that imposition on the public that's the reason for, whether it's disturbing the peace, whether it's something of that nature, the danger some behavior creates for society itself, the people. However, so there's that social thing going on. Some people are, I guess you could say, there is a relative value that people place on one another. And sometimes that value is very, very little, so much so that it is repelling in nature, right? They'll tell you, get the hell out. You know what I'm talking about? Vagrancy, things like that. Usually those people are treated like, I don't want to say social pariahs, but that kind of thing. we talked about that a little bit before in terms of it's like you have to realize what you're dealing with in terms of that population, all the problems associated with when you're talking about homelessness, social ills, mental illness, because that's going to overlap with that too, or just natural life problems. Here's another group where they start to look at it the same way again. Those who are under the influence of drugs, your drug addicts. Here in this country, you cannot make status a criminal offense. You know what that means? Okay. If you think back to juvenile law, you probably heard this phrase status offense. So typically you're talking about things like truancy. That's probably the best one that pops up in my mind at least, right? Truancy. You're out after curfew, right? It's not so much that you're out, it's that you have a curfew that prevents you from being in the public sphere for a period of time. That's not the same thing as what normal people have, right? You're truant. You're a runaway, right? We can punish you for that. It's something about you yourself. You were a drug addict. You were under the influence of alcohol or drugs itself, right? That's a status. You can't necessarily punish that. You're not supposed to punish those types of things. Juveniles are a little bit of an exception. Caveat here is depending on what you're doing and where you're at performing those behaviors while intoxicated is where you're in trouble or being in possession of those types of items, those types of whether it's contraband, instruments associated with such, that kind of thing. And you can also cross-reference those. That's why the minors in possession, contributing to the delinquency, all of those kinds of things. Yeah. So, what do I want to say out there? Public intoxication, drug incapacitation. Basically, what you're talking about there. Told you the Ron White joke about being thrown into public. Drug incapacitation is another one to think about. So think about weaponizing that. Right? I'm no longer going to deal with I myself becoming intoxicated. I'm going to instead choose to intoxicate someone else. And now you know what I'm talking about there. That's a different thing entirely. Uses some of the same vehicles, some of the same tools, right? The drugs and alcohol. Driving under the influence, you're operating on the roadway. And of course, giving stuff to people who shouldn't have access to it, contraband to them. That's why they're working that way. Realize that to some degree you're dealing with the behaviors, to some degree you're dealing with the population and how it is enforced. Basically how you start talking about how it's enforced will determine exactly what that looks like, whether that's something you're dealing with behaviors, whether you're using that as something to identify I guess those to be banished kind of thing. Because that's kind of how that can be handled, right? You have a bunch of homeless people coming into the area, it's pretty easy to run them off. Yes, no, and that kind of a thing. All right. Consuming and inhaling intoxicants in public places repealed. Okay. Persons under the influence, intoxicating penalty. Oop. Unlawful punishments provided by this drive, operate in actual physical control motor vehicle, in any of these places. If you've got such and such level of alcohol, Schedule 1 drugs, so on and so forth. Okay, so let's say we've got a supplemental thing where we're focusing on drugs for a bit. So I won't go too heavy into this. Realize that there are schedules there that govern use. There's some debate as to how drugs get placed into those different schedules because it has to do with medical applications, that kind of a thing. And Schedule 1 basically says that there's no medical application. Some schedule stuff too basically has to do with the dangers associated with those drugs, addictive qualities, things of that nature. Let's see. In fact, the person charged with violation sections. Okay. So the fact that you can drink or use a controlled substance is not a defense against violating this, right? The fact that you can buy alcohol doesn't mean that you can have it in your system above this. That should be pretty straightforward. Let's see. Possessions by persons under age 21. Okay. more than 3 2/10% alcohol by weight. There you go. That's the threshold for being in possession. Right? So you have to regulate the amount of alcohol in the drink itself for it to be considered an alcoholic drink, something that kind of thing. Okay. Weapons offenses. I think I talked a little bit about this already. Did I tell you about open carrying in Arkansas? I tell you that story. Sometimes I tell that one. I can't remember if I came up in here. Okay. So in the last 15 years, really, major changes across the nation in terms of one's ability to carry weapons, access, and being able to legally carry it in public spaces with you. What exactly that means varies very much by state. It's one that, though there is a federal law that, federal Second Amendment recognizes that you have this right across the country. How it is regulated at the state level varies so drastically that abiding by one state does not mean that you'll abide by any others. In fact, if you really want to get into it, this what is essentially a constitutional right, the ability to carry a firearm in public places, because of the dangers associated with it, we have to regulate it. It is a dangerous thing. When you start looking at how those things work, realize that it is to some degree a patchwork system. If you want to know, like if you go through the processes to be able to carry a weapon or that kind of thing within this state, to know whether or not your state's license is recognized anywhere else, you have to go look up that other state, the reciprocal agreements between these things, because it's like a big nasty spider web. These states will recognize these states, this state will recognize this one, but the state that recognizes it, they won't recognize that one. It's all kinds of it's a mess kind of a thing. It's one of those things. It's like, depending on how things go, maybe that's something that will get equalized across the country, or maybe it'll go away entirely. It's one of those things that'll have to give time, one way or the other. DC versus Heller, what had to do with was how much regulation they can place on it to some degree, in terms of access, in terms of condition, in terms of requirements around it. You're dealing with something dangerous. DC versus Heller, if I remember correctly, the requirements for this to have a firearm in DC at this point in time was this. Your home, you would need to have your firearm, we'll say, secured. I mean, it's usually locked in a safe kind of thing. And a condition where it cannot be fired. Yeah, they'd have that in there. So basically what that means is, depending on what you're looking at there, here's where it gets really interesting. Sometimes I won't go into that. Your ammo and your weapon need to be in separate locations. Okay. Okay. Person in question we were dealing with was actually a police officer. This law even applied to police officers. I forget exactly the details of what had happened here. If there was like some type of incident where the person used a firearm in their home or something like that. I'd have to go back and look at it because I don't remember the details. But essentially what happened was the regulations there was where even in your own home, we're going to regulate where you can have it, how much access you have to it, and we're going to require you to keep it in two separate places so it's completely non-functional, right? Someone kicks in your door, okay, I've got to go and find my safe. I have to go and unlock my safe. I have to go get my weapon, and then hopefully I don't have my ammo locked up too, because then I just doubled this entire process and I'm dead. What do we do? Right? It's one of those things that's really, really, really frustrating seeing, because this is a constitutional right. This is a situation where someone has the desire to affect defense that may need to be lethal in a particular situation because of regulation we placed on them. They're put into jeopardy and danger, right? Whenever people have this conversation, usually what they'll talk about is they'll put the access to a firearm against one's right to live. They're the same thing. That's why police officers carry a gun. Sometimes you need to stop a life to save a life, or stop one life to save two lives, or whatever. That kind of a thing. That is a hard reality to face, hard distinction to make. One, I hope no one ever has to make, but sometimes people do. And in that instance, ooh, 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 ooh. Unlawful carry. So we'll talk about open versus concealed carry, that kind of stuff, weapons. So you have the defensive element of it. We talked about that before. We'll talk about open versus concealed carry for a second, because some of this has to do with that. Okay. So where you can carry a weapon varies quite drastically, depending on licensing and that kind of stuff, what your state is set up to do. They won't be as regulated as this around here. These are areas, typically they're regulated like this because of that one, it's going to be population issues, large people in close proximity. You got guns that work, more likely to have people get hurt accidentally, right? You're also going to have more issues with cultures that come into conflict because they're in close quarters and they can become violent. And so they really regulate that stuff. So all those laws are a symptom of the problem, not the cure for it, though they try to use it as such. That's a different conversation. Here, what we need to talk about is some of the ways that this stuff can work, and one of the most interesting things I had seen. So, any provision of law, unlawful any person to carry about upon or about his or her person, any pistol, revolver, shotgun, rifle, loaded, unloaded, and other types of weapons too, right? Let's see. Proper use here, self-defense, hunting, fishing, educational, recreation, and it calls out the Self-Defense Act. So that's another one that, yeah, I guess I didn't put in this one. I probably have another one. And that's the one where you can outline the defense. Probably the most interesting thing is to watch the burden of proof in these types of things to make sure that they don't get switched around. For example, the one that I saw that was most interesting was out of Arkansas. They had statutes that they had put in place for concealed carry, and then they had a statute that had been in place which could be interpreted as having open carry, meaning you can carry openly without a license. And so no regulation there whatsoever. It's a constitutional right. Caveats to it. One of them is that to be able to do so, you have to not be intending to commit criminal acts of any kind. Right? The story that happened there was a guy goes into McDonald's. He's got a gun on. Boy there says, "You don't serve me, get out." "Well, you don't serve me because I'm affecting the Constitution. I'm not going anywhere. Give me my food. Here's my money." "No, you get out." Police are then called. Okay. Now I'm getting thrown in handcuffs because I've got a gun on me. Why am I getting handcuffs on me? Well, you're illegally carrying a firearm. You don't have a license, and you just wore it here to cause trouble. Show me you're not here to cause trouble. You didn't do this just to cause a scene, to get attention, because now you're breaking the law. Because that's crime against the public. See what I'm saying? That's how it works, right? You have to be very, very careful, because that one is not how it's supposed to. But sometimes people work it that way. That one actually, the person got convicted. I need to follow back up with that, because I need to find out if that ever got squared away. All right. which is cut off. Shall be prohibited from carrying firearm in the provision, person carries firearm in the manner. Shall be from carrying that. I'm going to assume that's going to say firearm. Okay. So that's the one about obstructing public passages and that. Issues with getting stop search related obstruction, possible infringement species, that's speech and expression. Right. So as you go and you have these demonstrations, as you go and you do these things, keep in mind that there's that line there that needs to be established. I always like to think of it in terms of burning flags, right? Because that's one of those things where you can see that social element right there. It's like one side that's really offensive to the other side. If there's a side there, it's like maybe neutral or in support of. And it's like, realize what that is really freedom of expression and speech. And is that something we want to punish? That if someone sets fire to their own property because of what it is, we want to criminally punish them. Ooh. In this case, public area, you have members of the public who are obstructing it. Is it for a public purpose, for their benefit, or detriment? Right? How much of a hindrance is this? What kinds of problems are produced? Okay. There's animal abuse in here. Talk a little about that. That's one where some of those sensitivities were coming out. You can see the punishments associated with such are usually pretty serious, which is interesting because you have that innocence element associated with animals. I think that's kind of coming up there, but I don't know. I'm digging down a little bit more. Harassment, here's where you start getting into communication. Various harassment techniques, insults, phone calls, incitation to violence, alarming conduct, repeatedly contacting people, that kind of thing. Here's where it talks about cruelty to the animal. Yeah. Not 5 years, not exceeding $5,000. Okay. Harassment. Here's one. Obscene, threatening, harassing, telecommunications or other forms of electronic communication. Right? Make comments, requests, suggestions, proposals, obscene, lewd, lascivious, filthy, indecent. Okay. Any questions about that stuff? How is it social media exists? It's usually, I never get on that stuff. The last time I was on there, it's like, yeah. Notice the purposes there, right? Offensive. This one's terrifying, intimidating, harassment. That's more aggressive. Physical harm. There's dangerous, and escalates through this thing. See, is there anything else I want to talk about in this part? This one, conspiracy and concerted actions with others. Right? Why? Because of how many different ways we communicate and how easy it is to do that kind of thing. Remember, we're dealing with public, we're dealing with that. Numbers of people. People starts talking about email, instant messages, that kind of a thing. Okay. So we're talking about obscene, lewdness, indecency. What are those things? Right? We're talking about the line between assault and battery, right? Typically, you're talking about battery, a touch something, right? Literally the slightest of touch, any touch whatsoever, you cross that line. Right? Where's the line here for this? What's obscene, lewd, and decent? So we use describe right behavior as an offensive to the extent that criminal laws invoke to try and curb the behaviors. Okay, I guess we'll go into this statute and see if that gives us any ideas. Any person who willfully or knowingly exposes themselves in public. Okay, that's okay. Now we get it. Now we know what we're talking about here. Okay. Think about things for a second. Let's go. There we go. All right. Procures, counsel, assist any person to expose such a person. Exhibit. Okay. Writes, composes, stereotypes, prints, photographs, designs, paints, molds, cuts, prepares, publishes, knowingly downloads any exhibits, obscene material. Okay, that's where you get to that one. Child pornography. That's it. That's not. Yeah. Makes, prepares, cuts, sells, gives loans, distributes disc, record, max, wire, tape recording, any obscene material or child pornography. It's like, okay, the child aspect's pretty easy to determine because that's an age thing, right? But what makes something obscene? What's the difference between something obscene and art?
Could be intent. Who you're exposing yourself to.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're in like an elementary school, that's a lot different than like
Ooh.
if it's like see the flyers outside on the walls. The art where they like draw naked people, I forget what it's called.
Yeah, yeah. There used to be one right over there where it was like a sketching type of thing. It's like, yeah. Maybe intent, maybe your audience. What else? That was one we can talk about a second. Ooh. Go with the art people. Medium. We talking canvas, we talking pictures, we talking the internet. Right? Something on canvas. Here, right? Might be over here. At the end of the day, what you end up with is something you can't quite classify. You can't. I wish I could remember the name of the Supreme Court justice who said this. But this is one where essentially where the Supreme Court ended up making this determination is can't tell you, but I know it when I see it. Okay, really? Yeah, that's how they do that. And so that's what you get with. So indecent exposure, obscene materials, and then they tie it into the child aspects because of the fact that it has that moral aspect to it. But yeah, your intent, your intended audience. And their perception of it, which you have no control of. You just have some influence. And then you're gonna wonder, how is it that social media thing works again? It's like I don't get that stuff. That stuff's it's obscene. Even whenever it's just the normal social stuff. I almost want to make a joke because it's got election season tomorrow. I really want to tell you guys how I'm going to vote. Not like in terms of party, how I actually vote. You know what I do? Pick one person in your spirit who's like, I'm going to cancel out your vote. You do it after spite. That's what I do at least. Like, the only thing is, I can only do that with one person. And so I've got front runners on all sides. So I was like, I got to pick that one person I get to call up afterward and like, I cancel that your vote. Then again, they canceled out mine. So who canceled who? That's the politics thing. And I don't get why people get so worked up about it either. If you do it that way, it's always fun. You have a lot of fun with it. That's me. Let's see, every person. Yeah, that's one. Next one. Crimes against public decency. Oh, wait a second. Okay, so we're talking about obscenity. We can kind of have some common ground that some people should not be exposed to certain things at certain times, right? The children aspect of it. Oh, connection issues. It could be the weather kind of thing. I'm surprised many people will make it in. This is what we had because of the bad weather. Very interesting because it's like if you think about it, I want to say it was in one of these slides somewhere where we talked about the crime of like public urination. It's gross. People have to do it sometimes, and they'll do it in public. And if you do it in the wrong place, yeah, what have you done? Something indecent. It might have exposed to eyes of those who are innocent and don't need to see those types of things, right? So there's that real aspect of something that's indecent or inappropriate. And then I have this slide right here, which is about relationships getting regulated. We've also used that system for this system for that, right? So when we're talking about sex crimes, sodomy, you know what that is. I think you know what that is. You don't look it up. I don't need to explain that one. Not touch now. This one is most common in well, non-traditional sexual relationships kind of thing. And so what happened is I think I showed you in one of the slides where you can see, maybe it was an earlier one where it talks about the morally repugnant act of this thing or whatever language they use to infer that moral condemnation of it. And so that's what this is. It's moral condemnation of relationships that are to some degree, sexual behaviors. Solicitation, promises, bribes, methods to entice someone to have unlawful sexual intercourse with them. What are they talking about? Adultery, that kind of thing. And so if you think about, fornication, unlawful sexual intercourse between two unmarried persons of opposite genders. So it literally just criminalized sex. That's it. It was criminal, right? You're not married? Oh, that's breaking the law. I have a friend who refers to people as fornicators. That's not the language he uses, though. That's my joke. Bad language. That right there, it's like that's normal behavior across all time, across all cultures. Okay, each of these things technically is you can call it normal behaviors across time, across space, across cultures, across humanity, across whatever you want to talk about. But we regulated it at different times, and we've taken steps away from it. But some are still on books. You can still see those things. You can see other elements in other places, right? Okay, so you have seduction, fornication, adultery, right? Think about the contextual changes of relationships and marriage in the last, what did you say, 60 years, something like that. How much those things have changed. Much divorces have changed, how much these relationships have changed, and there is this is gonna be a little off topic because it's kind of interesting. Civil versus criminal. You start talking about this when you start moving into like typically cross-reference back with property really is what you start looking at to some degree. When you start thinking about this, the criminal side, relationships, really what you're talking about is to some degree property on the civil side, money, resources, that kind of thing. Okay, so think con artists, things of that nature, and the ways that people can move money through relationships, that kind of thing. There are still correlates for this kind of stuff in this system. That'd be like the phrase here, alienation of affection. So it's like you might not have the criminal side of this still, but it's one of those things that we still have ways to address those same types of behaviors. Before, our society was one that those relationships, the nature of that was so, I don't want to say so, I don't want to say structured because that's not the word I'm looking for. It's not structured. It's not necessarily oversight. And regulate is probably not the best word. It's sort of like the strictness for which society viewed those types of things was one that they would literally bring down the law on you for violating it. Now you can still do it to some degree in some places, but you have to look to see what types of statutes take place, which ones are still in effect, and you can find things like that. And so, but those things are still there. And so it's really interesting. But really, what you're regulating here is sexual relationships. Why are we doing that? Why do we need to do that? Do we need to do that? Do we? I don't know. As societies change, we do less of it. Some that's good, some that's bad. And it's always mixed. And so I don't know. All right. Let's see here. Next one. Ooh, bigamy. That one I talked a little bit about whenever I was talking about what was it? Missouri. I talked about that one in here. Missouri extermination orders. That sound familiar? You guys give me a funny look like I wasn't in here. I was in here. You guys are playing. All right. Well, what about out of time? We'll pick up that one next time. Basically, what I was going to talk about was did I not talk about executive orders in here at any point in time? No, that's a different class, maybe. That might be a different class. I can't remember. But we'll talk about that. Basically, what bigamy is it's one of those things that you can have those who was it pluralistic marriage. You can see TV shows on that. That's not usually the case. What it is, usually you end up with people who are living double lives kind of thing. Where it's like, yeah, you got a second marriage, third marriage, fourth marriage. How many different lives does this person live and bouncing around that kind of thing. And so we're just trying to use that system to basically acquire resources and that kind of a thing. But we'll pick up with that next time. You all have a great day. If you need anything, let me know. And see you Wednesday. Have a good one. All right. And share. Bye, everybody.